All right, Windows is trying to update, and my browser just crashed. And then, of course, Norton senses something, and it starts to scan. So my computer gets real slow. It always starts with a Windows update, and that crashes the Foxfire, whatever it's called now, and then um, Norton piles on. So I go to do something productive, and I know I'm screwed. Now, this video is called My Last Great Toy. And you're going to say, what the hell do you mean? Well, I notice when I talk to guys my age, I'm a baby boomer, 70 years old, and they sort of talk about the past. And I sort of keyed into this thing where as long as you move along to something new that's interesting, you don't talk about the past. You're in the present. You're working on something you think's really cool. Now, I told you I have a thing for old radios. I like to work on them. But I noticed at some point, I looked back and I said, okay, cell phones have sort of topped out or peaked out. You might argue, well, there's more memory, the cameras have gotten better. But let's look at cell phones as a unit. And let's look at DVD players and VCRs as a unit, and television as a unit, a great stereo as a unit. There's so many things that, as I was growing up, were coming along. Now, of course, when you're younger, it may be you want a BB gun, you get a BB gun, you do all the things you would do with a BB gun. We went through a period of tops, wooden tops. I found them down at a riverbank floating around, and I didn't know what they were, and I brought them home. I washed them off, and I showed them to a guy, and he took one, and he left, and he come back a week later with a piece of string and a button, and he showed us how these old fancy tops worked, how you wind the string around it, you snap it, and it spins on the ground. And the kids in my neighborhood never saw that before. I never saw that before. So I was up at the candy store and I mentioned it, and the guy came out with a big box of these wooden tops with the steel tip, and I showed him the string. I actually showed him mine, and then he was selling them the top along with a piece of string and a button, and that was a fad for a while. And then of course, you had yo-yos. Being a baby boomer, we had the wiffle ball bat. We had all kinds of toys that had some type of wiffle ball in it. Highlight scoops with the wiffle ball. Oh, it just went on and on. You had a baseball bat, a plastic baseball bat, that if you swung correctly, it had a marble in it, and it would make a snap noise. And that came with a stand that when you stepped on it, it would pitch the ball up in the air. It was like a wiffle ball, and it was on the piece. It had like a rubber mouth it went into, and when you stepped on this thing, the pressure would cause the wiffle ball to pop out straight up, and you could bat it. And that's the bat that also had the marble in it. So we had that toy, and you didn't always have the toy, but some kid on your block had the toy. So you're walking down the street, and one of the kids has a gasoline car in the street, and his dad built him a big weight with a swivel arm, and he'd start the little motor car up by using a bicycle that was upside down. So that was the thing. You would come out a couple times a year. The kid would get that car out, and you'd sit there and watch that. And then later on, you might have a car like that was gas powered. So, and then my friend Jim had the water rocket, water missile. It was a Mattel water missile. You hooked it up to the garden hose, and it had two stages. And you had to wait for 3 minutes for the water to go into the bottom stage and slowly get up into the top stage. And then when you pulled the string, it would launch. The bottom stage would go up, say, 10 feet, and then the second stage would launch off the bottom stage. And the thing would go about 150 feet in the air, and then downrange maybe 300 feet. So as you're growing up, there's these toys that come along. Now you get your first car, and suddenly at the same time, 8-track players came out. Now they came out before the cassette players. So you have a car, and suddenly it became a big thing to have an 8-track player. Now me being a repair guy, I'm putting them in for people, I'm repairing them for people. There was also a period of time where CB radios became popular. So you have that. High school water pistols. One day a year, the principal would allow water pistols in the school, and then the next day you better not bring one in. It would be everybody would look a certain way. The teachers would look the other way, and you would shoot your water pistol in the high school, and then the next day that was it. You didn't bring the water pistol out one day. I remember one of the teachers, he had a machine gun, a mob type of machine gun water pistol, that he was waiting for a water pistol day. So as you're growing up, yo-yos, Duncan yo-yo, the miniature cap guns. There were all these little toys that a car that you wound up, it went along the ground, and if it hit something and it exploded, you'd put it together and then it would explode. And the Bulldog tank, there were all these toys. And as you went along, you had your fish tank as a hobby. You'd get your baseball out, and a bunch of usually would play baseball, and then you'd get basketballs out, and then we had kites. One kid would buy a kite, and we'd all go buy kites, and we'd all get cloth from our mothers and make tails for it. Get a big ball of string. We'd go down to the local football field and we'd fly kites. And that would be a two-day thing, and then it would just die. You wouldn't see anybody else down there with a kite. And then we had a phase where one kid found a boomerang in a store, a wooden boomerang, and he didn't know how to throw it right. And he used to throw it, and it would go up and do like a L shape, and it would come back at us. And we'd all run. And sometimes we'd do it on snow. And that ran about a week of on and off, depending on the weather, of playing with that boomerang. Let me think of some of the other things, man. It was just, all right, let me just put it this way. As I was growing up, there was always something coming along. You're sitting at work, and someone mentions a rock tumbler. And I went out and bought a rock tumbler, and I told you the story once before. And just coincidentally, my father mentioned it to his sister. She had gone to a place and they dug for Apache tears, which looks like glass. And when you hold up to light, it's transparent or translucent, smoky color. And I broke off pieces and I put them into the tumbler, and they come out really nice. My father was making rings and earrings and rings out of it. And that was a whole thing. So yeah, rock tumbler. Oh, and then Heathkit was around. So I would buy, I bought a Heathkit automotive unit, which did dwell and tack on my car. So there was that I bought. Oh, and also there was these color organs. You'd hook it up to your stereo, and you could hook them to lights, and lights would blink on and off to the music. There were great stereos, turntables, records, better cartridges. So you're sitting at work, and you got 5 or 6 guys talking to you about certain things that are coming out. Now, one of those things would be interesting to you, and you'd go out and buy it, or a new record album. And then, of course, the VCR hit, and we had video clubs, and I had the video club. I was recording videos and passing them around to people. There was always something coming along. Even at work, we had Frisbee time during the better times of the year. Every day or every other day, you'd go out and throw the Frisbee on the front lawn of the company. So, and I would buy some really good Frisbees. There were several different weights of Frisbee. And we would do that. And, we got into cameras. I bought them, and I had a Pentax camera, 35 millimeter, got into that, got into buying a flash unit, taking pictures of people, switched to a Minolta. What the other things we did CB radios, cassette players later on, and a really good stereo for the car. And you would put one in your car, and then your friend would want one in his car. I can't forget the bicycle rider. 10-speed bikes became popular, and I started riding one when I was, I would say I would be right after tech school. I would say I was 21 when I got my first 10 speed. And I'd go out bike riding, and old people would wave to me to come over. And then they'd say to me, "Don't you think you're kind of old to be riding a bicycle?" And then it became a fad. And I'd be out there. I was out there 2 or 3 years before it became popular. And people would come over and ask me questions of where's a good bike shop. And I knew of one. He hit it just right. And you had the bicycle. And let me think of some of the other stuff. I got into long distance walking, which I still do. But there always seemed to be something coming along. Now, the last great thing to come along was this helicopter. Now, I had remote control glider with a styrofoam foam wing. It was held on with rubber bands, and you launched it with a high start. And it was more trouble than it was worth. When it would crash, you had to work on it for 2 or 3 days to get it so it'd be up in the air. Now, this thing here, you can fly in the house. You don't need a license. You don't have to register it. But I consider that thing that you're looking at the last great toy. When I was talking to some of my friends about this, they had gotten one, didn't mention it, said they could never get it to fly right. And I started explaining to them what was involved. Being older, they didn't want to hear it. They had tried to fly it, gave up on it, that was it. And as I was walking, I'd mentioned to someone that I bought one of these Blade 70S's, and they said they had gotten something similar, they couldn't get it to fly right. And what I realized was it kind of warns you online on the box, if you're a certain age, your reflexes aren't going to be good enough. So I knew that going into it. So every day for 2 months, I would go down in the living room, fly it. I'd fly it 3 times every day, just bring it up off the ground and get it to hover. And then maybe hover to the right, hover to the left, very, very, very gently, getting the feel of that stick at my age, and knowing that my reflexes, if they got away from me, won't be good enough. But I was able to make it come up in the air and do a figure eight in the living room. That was the goal, a figure eight, because then it's flying towards you, the controls get reversed, you have to reverse the controls in your head, and when I think I was 69 at the time, maybe 70, I even forget how many years, but in other words, it's a task when you get older. You don't realize how your brain diminishes. Your my coordination was never really great, but I stayed with it, and I consider this the last great toy. I have a cell phone. I got into the new television system that's through the air. I bought the antenna, HDTV, getting free channels, and they all suck now because they're all running the same shows with the same medical commercials. Now, there is a new version of the television through the air, but they seem to be locking the channels out. They want you to subscribe, even though it's supposed to be free television. So I'm not involved anymore. I've weaned myself from regular television. I watch stuff on YouTube, and that's about it. But I sat there and I started thinking, why is getting older so crappier as a baby boomer? And everything on television was about baby boomers. When I grew up, they were always making me something new. And you would sit there at work and someone goes, "Hey, I got one of them VCRs." Now, I had trouble getting a VCR. I had the money, but every time I wanted to buy one, somebody at work needed money. I mean, big money for a major car repair. And I would always loan people money. And that was my extra money that I'd be willing to put out there. Now, when I get it back from them, somebody else had a problem. And at some point, the VCR came down to $820, and I bought it at Trader Horn, which isn't in business anymore. And my mother didn't know what I wanted it for, but it was pretty interesting. I could set the timer during the day, and they would WTBS would play old television shows like the Munsters, maybe even Leave It to Beaver, and I'd come home at night from overtime on a really crappy day, and I would go down in the rec room, and I would rewind that tape, and I had a pause control. I didn't have a full remote on the first one, but I could get up and fast forward through a program that I remembered, and then maybe watch the Leave It to Beaver episode. It was more than the Munsters. I forget the whole lineup that they had of black and white televisions. And that was different. And then, of course, you go get an adult movie, and then you pass that around at work. I won't go into that, but that's hilarious stuff too. And then I started getting heavily into TV decoders, and I was able to break every system that was around back then. And I could not only watch, I could also record. Even the WHT, my old deck was an RCA V01, V501. Well, anyway, it had a patch cord, and the Wilmeco Home Theater had separate audio. And I one day I just happened to take the audio and put it into the patch, and then I realized it actually allowed me to record the sound from the movie that's being decoded through the air onto a tape. And that helped out a lot because there was a strike involved at the time, and I was able to get some programming for this one guy. And it was just one thing after another. There was always something you wanted to buy. And then, I retire and I got into the CNC, and that moved along, and I was moving along with it and coming up with cheaper and cheaper machines and selling the plans. And there was always something come on. And the 3D printing came along, and I'm saying, you know what? It's basically the same idea. In one case, you're taking the material and you're removing it. And in another case, you're putting the material down. And the problem is, like, I was getting towards the guitar bodies, and I was helping guys with that. In other words, you could cut out a guitar body. Well, with the 3D printing, I think the guy says it's 24 something hours to print a guitar body with the best machine. So, and it's plastic. It doesn't turn out to be a real wooden guitar. So I went through all that, and then all of a sudden I started looking around. I got some fish tanks again, and I started saying to people, and these older guys than me, they're into babysitting their grandchildren. I said, there's nothing new coming along. You can bring out your cell phone and show me it's got a better camera on it, but I said, cell phones now, I think they've been around 20 years, and that's not new to me. Okay, it takes better pictures, and then some of the stuff you can forward pictures. I could do all that on the computer before they did. I was online before they knew what online was. So what new has come along? Right? One day I saw this thing, and helicopters in the back of my mind have always been cool, and I bought it. And like I said, I spent 2 months practicing every day, just like you do. If you go up I have a helicopter training school near me. I don't actually know if it's still there, but I watched the guy train, and I talked to him when he got off it, and he says, the first few lessons, you're just sitting above ground, and he says, you got to be able to come up off the ground correctly without flipping the helicopter, and land it back down. It's just like a real airplane. The takeoff and landing is real dangerous. And he said to me, that's all the guy does. And he says, you can tell if a person's going to be any good in the first 10 minutes. Their hand coordination, them becoming one with the machine. So he told me all this, and I told him, I said, yeah, I get this toy helicopter at home. And I said, it's killing me. And he says, it's your age. He knew right away. He says, yeah. He says, you get older, it's very hard for your brain to learn new things that require coordination. And it's not your eyesight. It's just the pathways in through your brain, the speed, the neurons, whatever the hell is up in there, the message waves and that. It gets messed up. And then with a helicopter, when you fly a helicopter, if you panic and over move the control on the controller, the plane now goes faster in one direction, and to be able to recover that, it takes a while. And then as the helicopter got away from me now, I know not to panic too much, and your hand just automatically corrects, and the helicopter doesn't go slamming into the living room wall. And it was pretty amazing. But this is the last great toy, and right now it's sitting on a radio I'm working on. And the radio is like nothing I've ever worked on before. And there's also a Collins R390 up there on eBay for $300. Of course, the guy wants $149 to ship it, and nobody's bidding on it because it's a dying hobby. And the remote control helicopters and airplanes, actually the drones are the biggest part of the hobby, and then maybe helicopters, and then maybe park flyers. That hobby has changed also. And I was in at remote control. I have some, I was going to say Collins, but I have the old Kraft systems. I modified and made them go back to 27 megacycles, so I could actually operate them and do certain things with them. And because you're not supposed to be on those old frequencies anymore. But this was the last new toy, and I keep looking for something new to come along. And oh, I did go through the Arduino stuff, and you can see my coil winder. I got it to wind a wave coil. I didn't wind a solenoid coil. I got it to do a wave, but you have to inject error into the winding, because if you don't inject error, the motors, the stepper motors, want to keep putting the string or the wire exactly in the same place over and over and over. But if you inject a couple missteps in your program, then what happens is it slowly moves over the thickness of the wire, and then at the next time it lays down a pattern, it's next to the first pattern. If you don't put error in there, it'll mess up on you. It'll just keep winding it on top of it. The other way to do it is take the motor, one of the stepper motors, and put it through a gear that has an odd number of teeth. And you can do it that way. That's what I learned out of it. I have a coil winder, an old piece of junk. Everybody collects the thing. It was like $18 when it sold online. Nobody's ever used it. And people pass it around. It goes for a lot of money on eBay. I bought one time. And that's what I found. That's what the trick of the wave coil was. The gear you use is an odd number of teeth. So once I knew the secret, I knew that I could move that secret idea over to the step-in motors. I know how to program step-in motors. I know how to program the Arduino enough, and I got it all working. But after I see it work, it was no fun. Now this was tough. Going down there every day, charging it up. I bought extra batteries. Go down there 3 times a day. Fly it up off the floor, maybe go forward, backwards, right, left, and then come up off the floor with the model facing me. Right to left, it's backwards. So then you go and you fly it around in a circle in one direction. Then you learn to fly it around in the other. And then the second month you start working on making it fly a figure 8. And at my age, and I tried to videotape myself doing the figure 8, and just knowing the camera was running, I couldn't do it. And several times I was trying to fly this model after I did the video on the setting the trims. I just start to talk. To think to talk is enough to mess my brain up enough that I lose control of the model. Hilarious stuff. And I see these guys with these several models up from this, making it act like a manic, crazy thing on the street. That's not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to come up off the ground, fly around, do a figure 8, and make it land before the battery runs out. And that was the goal. And I couldn't share this with anybody except maybe online. I show people how to do the trims, because most of the guys, they basically babysit their grandchildren. And I walk around through neighborhoods and I find the guy sitting outside, and I walk over and I can start a conversation with anybody. And the guy will tell me, yeah, he takes care of his daughter's property and watches the kids. It's pitiful. And I'll start talking about a helicopter. They have no clue what I'm talking about. They don't even want to think about that there's a model toy that they're trying to stop any kind of thought because they're retired. They don't want to learn anything new. They don't want you to spring anything new. Where me, I keep looking for something new to come along. And that's just the way I am. Of course, when I'm walking, they'll say to me, I see you walking over here. I see you walking over there. I said, yeah. I said, I walk, I stop and talk to people. Hopefully you'll learn something new. But lately, nothing new's coming down the pike. No one surprised me. I mean, no one told me about this helicopter. I bumped into it on YouTube. And I'm saying, well, how much does something like that go for? $59. Show me where to sign up. And this thing was like $59. And when I got it, I think it was on the box, a warning: if you were elderly or senior, you might have trouble with it. And I'm like, I got the idea because from video games. Also, I put a simulator and I bought the controller that plugs into the computer, and you hold in your hand a controller that's just like the controller to fly the plane, and you can work on it on the screen, flying a helicopter or flying a Piper Cub, and it was a aircraft model simulator. I had that installed. Of course, Windows changed, updated itself, and then one day it had to fix itself, and it wiped out some of my programs. But I had several Piper Cubs, really nice ones that I could fly on a couple different programs, and Windows wiped it out on me. And then when I try to reinstall, of course, Windows doesn't want to run that program anymore. But I would sit there. I have a simulator unit that plugs into the USB, and you can program it to work the flaps or the ailerons. And I did that for a while. And then when I saw this helicopter, I said, let me go that next step. You know, $59, it was worth it. And I didn't break it. It still works great. I do have tiny little nicks in the blades. It comes with a spare set of blades. But that was the last new toy. And I'm trying. I bought that SDR radio, lipstick on a pig, real big screen, waterfall display. It's a piece of shit. And I always get negative comments whenever I mention the SDR being a piece of shit. And there's some people, they don't understand shortwave. They've never really DX'd anything that's really hard to DX because they've never had a really good radio around them. And they think the SDR is great because you can get police band with it. You can get the satellites as you come over the house, but everything requires a good antenna, a special antenna. And the radio itself just can't do the frequencies unless it's hooked to a large antenna because the thing's a piece of shit. DX390 works really good just with the whip on top of it. You can do all kinds of stuff with that. But that's old. That's in the past. This was the first new toy. This was totally different. I mean, I did have a remote control that I actually built the transmitter receiver myself from scratch. It was a foam wing plane. It might have been, it wasn't Kraft. I think it might have been Cox. No, there's another name there. They used to make these pulse directional, pulse only module things. I'll think of it as soon as I'm done with the video. It'll hit me what the name of it is. Ace. Here it is, Ace. I used to go to the local store. It was an Ace Hardware, but it was a hobby shop, and he had a whole bunch of outdated magazine things for Ace, and I bought them, and I come home and they show you how to wire a receiver up from scratch, and I also bought the tab book on it on remote control, and I think the Ryder had one too. It was tab and the other ones. They produced these books years ago, how to build this, how to build that. See, that's gone too. After a while, even Heathkit, they had a VCR, but most of it was put together. You just wired some of it, and you aligned just some of it. And the TV sets were getting like that too. They had modules that you wired between modules. And so it was a repeat. It was just a television set. And maybe I think they might have had one big screen television, projection type, but even Heathkit bailed. And then, I had Heathkit, you had Radio Shack. You walk in a Radio Shack for a roll of solder, and over there on the wall, you see some type of thing you never saw before. And out of the store I went with the roll of solder and the new thing. And then, of course, as Radio Shack would have been the place that I would have got an Arduino. But they weren't into Arduinos. I think they got into it like right after I was into Arduino. And, I got the little tiny Arduinos. And after a while, I don't like programming. And it's only a lot of the projects people are doing, I've done the hard way. And I don't want to do it again. But this was the greatest new toy. And I talked to a few people about this. And I showed it to two people. And they didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to look at it. I'm noticing older people, my age, they don't want to learn anything new. It's like they just want to keep their brains stupid. And you can't talk about anything new like this when you talk to an old person. They get nervous. I don't know, that type of stuff. And basketball, you can't go play basketball because you get rotator cuff problems, and you just kind of get slower and slower and slower. And then one day when I go by and ask about you, you're dead. And that's what I'm finding. I went out, mowed the lawn this morning. I also went for a walk, and I'm thinking about another walk now. When I walk, I sleep really good at night. And then in between, I work on this Collins radio. I think that's it. All right, that's it.